It is ironic, isn't it, that I, a man so reviled in the controlled media, speaks to you on behalf of peace. I hope I'm not the only one to speak out forcefully against this horrific Zionist-instigated war in Iran, but there are so few of us that are. This war will be catastrophic, not only for the people of Iran, but for America, for Europe, and the whole world. In pursuit of a war with Iran, the Zionist-dominated U.S. globalist media and many Zionist-influenced governments are now busy demonizing Syria, and they are literally supporting the terrorists who want to create a horrific civil war in that country. Here's a short excerpt from a Russian TV interview with a very respected journalist in the UK, Jonathan Steele. It's an interview you won't see on mainstream media in America or the EU. But it will give you some incredible insight into the Zionist treachery, both in global media and the Zionist-influenced foreign policy of the United States, the UK, France, Germany, and the EU.
They seem to be siding with Assad's opponents here. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they've decided that Assad is a lost cause. They don't like his links to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They don't like the fact that he's sort of in the front line of opposition to Israel. And of course Syria has quite good relations with Iran. So they've decided, I think, that it's almost like a proxy war against Iran. If you can topple Assad, it's considered to be a sort of proxy blow against the government in Iran.
So as Mr. Steele points out, the American Zionist-controlled support of the terrorists trying to overthrow Assad has nothing really to do with human rights. If human rights was the real issue, America and Europe would be supporting a war against Israel, not Syria. Unlike Syria and Iran, Israel's a nation that has ethnically cleansed hundreds of thousands of people, Palestinians, from their homes, that has killed tens of thousands of them, that has tortured tens of thousands more in their dungeons. Recently, we witnessed a spectacle of Israel murdering 1,200 defenseless people in Gaza, half of them women and children, wounding and burning thousands more of them. Imagine mothers and their children burned alive in their own beds. And now these Zionist murderers are bombarding you with bucketfuls of lying propaganda because they hate Syria and Assad, because Assad opposes the crimes of Israel. And they see the destruction of Syria and the suffering of millions of Syrians, a Syria racked by civil war and conflict, as the destruction of an enemy nation and destruction of a key ally of Iran, which is at the top of their hate list, along with people like me. And of course, Israel and Jewish extremists around the world are the ones who beat the loudest drums of war against Iran. So the whole Syrian issue is about one fundamental thing: the Zionist hate and war campaign against their enemies in the Mideast. And it's about nothing else. And it all leads to their biggest objective, the destruction of Iran. Because of Zionist infiltration and power in our governments, their incredible level of ownership and infiltration of media, and their incredible financial power over the economy of America and Europe through their control of the Federal Reserve Bank, the IMF, and the World Bank, and a bunch of international robber banks like Goldman Sachs, they can manipulate us to fight their bloody wars, to carry out the evil agenda of the Zionists. Now, you might be one of the unawakened who don't even know that the Zionist masters of the Federal Reserve, such as Alan Greenspan, the former head, and Ben Shalom Bernanke, the current head, lead a private organization that prints our money and sets monetary policy and doesn't even have to do what the President of the United States says or even what the Congress says. Watch this video of Greenspan showing his unbridled power.
What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a President of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. So long as that is in place and there is no evidence that the administration or the Congress or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relationships are don't frankly matter.
As Baron Rothschild stated in 1790, let us issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. Now, this Zionist agenda has led to well over 1 million women and children dying in Iraq and Afghanistan in wars based on lies, wars for Israel, as well as the maiming and killing of hundreds of thousands of our own brave young men and women. All for what? Lies, lies, and more lies. And America is only more hated and more in danger from these wars, not safer. And America is going broke to finance these Zionist wars, fought for Israel, not for America, and surely not for Europe. These wars are not about oil. They're not about American imperialism. They're not about any true interest of the American people. They're actually damaging to America, to Europe, and to the world. They are for Israel and the agenda of international Zionism, and that's the only thing they're about. If you care at all about human rights, listen closely to the next excerpt from this very brave UK journalist.
What's the worst case scenario should Syria completely collapse into civil war?
Well, the worst case scenario is massive ethnic cleansing. Christians, who are about at least 10% of the population, possibly more, in Syria, are very worried. They probably, most of them, as what one understands, prefer the Assad regime, which has been very tolerant to Christianity, no problem with any kind of religious discrimination. They're more worried about the Muslim Brotherhood, who are the main force in the opposition, the armed opposition to Assad, than they are about the Assad regime. So Christians could suffer greatly. Look what's happened to Iraqi Christians. Most of them have had to flee. And I think that's partly why there are these big demonstrations in support of Assad.
In America, Christians are so brainwashed, I guess they don't even care about the suffering of their fellow Christians anymore. Only about Israel. So now the Zionists, they're busily trying to support a bloody civil war in Syria, which would lead to the horrific loss of tens of thousands of innocent men, women, and children, and the probable installment of a radical Muslim Brotherhood dictatorship. So, the question is, why would the American, French, UK, and EU governments and media support the installation of a radical Muslim Brotherhood regime in Syria? The government and media tell us every day that we've got to fight against radical Muslims. There's only one answer, of course: divide and conquer. It's the same policy that former Israeli Premier Moshe Sharett wrote about in his diaries, where he details how Israel committed covert terrorist attacks against both Christians and Muslims in Lebanon. This so they would blame each other and spark civil war and destroy the country and make it easy for Israel to invade and steal the land and water of both Christians and Muslims in Lebanon. And they killed over 40,000 in those two wars. And they're doing the same thing in Syria. They don't care how radical and how terrorist a war-torn regime and nation is, as long as there's no real state power and unity that can stand up to Israel. And besides, they love every desperate Arab act of terror in the West, whether car bombers, shoe bombers, underwear bombers, train bombers, or 9/11. Because these horrific acts can be manipulated to support their Zionist wars. Listen to Steele's words. You'll see the whole war on terrorism is nothing but a big lie. Right now, Zionist-controlled America is supporting terrorism in Syria. In fact, terrorism by the Muslim Brotherhood there. You can be absolutely sure that America is supplying weapons and explosives to the extremists trying to destabilize Syria. Right now, American servants of Zionism are supporting terrorist actions inside the borders of Iran. Listen again, as Steele points out, who many of the real victims in a war against Syria will be: the millions of Christians in Syria. Please listen closely.
So Christians could suffer greatly. Look what's happened to Iraqi Christians. Most of them have had to flee.
They know the radical Muslim Brotherhood, which has extreme anti-Christian elements within it, are the main agents of terrorism and violence against the Assad government. The media never tells you that Christians have flourished and were protected under even Saddam Hussein. But our insane wars have led to ethnic cleansing of Christians in Iraq with the fall of his government. Now millions of Christian Syrians face the same kind of horrific danger. Assad is a proven friend of Christians, but he's being attacked because he opposes the evils of Israel. I have visited with both the Christian and Muslim leader in Syria, and I can tell you they support Assad. And the Christian minority are terribly afraid right now that if the government falls, that their families will be in danger. What traitors we have in our government and media and international banking houses to support Zionist evil against our fellow Christians. Finally, Russian TV asked a question that American and UK media would never dare ask.
What have countries like the UK, France, America got to gain with Syria here? There's no oil well, or is it the Iran question?
It's the anti-Iranian thing and the feeling that Assad is unreliable on the Israeli question.
The answer, of course, is we gain nothing. In fact, we and our interests are incredibly harmed. We get a war with Iran, which will be catastrophic for us and the world. And every Christian nation should have natural concern for the horrific harm we would do to our fellow Christians in Syria. Why do Western governments pursue this insane policy? Assad is, quote, unreliable on the Jewish question. You see, our media and finances have been hijacked by the Zionists. Nothing matters but the interests of Jewish supremacist Israel and the interests of international Zionist globalism. How sick it is to see once more overwhelmingly Christian nations support the evil of anti-Christian Israel against fellow Christians in the Middle East. They are already leading the fight to destroy our Christian values at home in America and Europe with their control of the news and entertainment media in the West. Hollywood is a cesspool of degeneracy and violence and inhumanity. Organized Jewish groups in America have been the leaders of the war on Christmas and the destruction of our Christmas traditions. They're also supporting the massive non-European immigration, which will ultimately lead to civil war in America and in all European nations, just as they propose in Syria. Watch my video on Zionist, quote, divide and conquer. And now they want our nations to directly support terrorism, a terrorism that will result in the murder and suffering and displacement of Christian families in Syria. Israel's already killed and maimed tens of thousands of Christians in Lebanon, killed and maimed and dispossessed tens of thousands of Palestinian Christians, and almost destroyed the once vibrant Palestinian Christian community in the Holy Land. For the sake of God, for the sake of millions of Christian families of Palestine and Syria, and for the sake of millions of Muslim families, don't let these evil Zionists and their slaves in media and government push America and Europe to support a bloody civil war in Syria. Don't let the Zionists push us into a war with Iran when the real nuclear rogue state is actually Israel, when the real murderous terrorist state is Israel, a nation that's committed terrorism against America in the Levant affair and the attack on their liberty. Frenchmen, Germans, members of the UK, Muslim nations, your leaders have sold you out to the Zionists. Free yourself of the Zionist occupation of our governments, of the Zionist occupation of the media, of the Zionist occupation of the international banks. Stop the planned insane Zionist wars in Syria and Iran. This Christmas, be men and women of peace. Peace on earth and goodwill toward men, not Zionist slaves ready to bring death and destruction to millions of people. Stand up. If not now, when? If not you, then who? It's time that you and all of us stand up for the truth, unafraid and courageously. For truth and peace and decency in this world. Stop the war. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and Merry Christmas to all. the UK, France, Germany, and the EU.
They seem to be siding with Assad's opponents here. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they've decided that Assad is a lost cause. They don't like his links to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They don't like the fact that he's sort of in the front line of opposition to Israel. And of course Syria has quite good relations with Iran. So they've decided, I think, that it's almost like a proxy war against Iran. If you can topple Assad, it's considered to be a sort of proxy blow against the...
Excerpt from a Russian TV interview with a very respected journalist in the UK, Jonathan Steele. It's an interview you won't see on mainstream media in America or the EU. But it will give you some incredible insight into the Zionist treachery, both in global media and the Zionist-influenced foreign policy of the United States, for America, for Europe, and the whole world. In pursuit of a war with Iran, the Zionist-dominated U.S. globalist media and many Zionist-influenced governments are now busy demonizing Syria, and they are literally supporting the terrorists who want to create a horrific civil war in that country. Here's a short excerpt. It is ironic, isn't it, that I, a man so reviled in the controlled media, speaks to you on behalf of peace. I hope I'm not the only one to speak out forcefully against this horrific Zionist-instigated war in Iran, but there are so few of us that are. This war will be catastrophic, not only for the people of Iran,